Well, hi everyone in grade 4-5. Today I'm sitting here at the display, a model display of what your museum could possibly look like. Now, in the real museum there isn't corkboard, so we're going to have to get creative when it comes to building your displays. But we're not going to worry about that quite yet. Let's look at what's going on behind me and how I'm meeting some of the expectations. Right now you're not going to see my presentation, you're just going to hear about what's on the walls. The one thing that you need to make sure you're doing is answering the W5 with your display. That's the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. Because those questions are super important when you're talking about your ancient civilization. So I started doing that with my display over here on the War of 1812 by saying, what started the War of 1812? There's an American perspective and a British perspective. Okay, so I've got both of those going there. And then if it's between the American and the British, why did it happen here in Canada? So a little bit about that as well. So that covers the important bits. There were novels written about the War of 1812. There are more websites than I can count. I'm not going to put all of that information up here. If people want to read the novels, they can. As a museum exhibit, it's my job to go through the information that I've read and do something that's called synthesizing. In other words, picking out key pieces of information that are really important that I want my audience to know. That's what I'm going to put on my display board. One or two pieces of information. The next thing that I did was I included a map and a timeline. And if you look at your success criteria that Mrs. Harmer has given you, these are things that you need to have as part of your presentation to give a sense of location and give us a bit of a sense of time. So this is how you can incorporate it. I cheated because I found one through the Canadian Geographic Society. You probably won't be so lucky, so you might have two separate things. However that works for you, it doesn't have to look like this. Okay, the next thing I did was I wanted to look at the weapons. Because I'm looking at a war, the weapons are an invention, like in your success criteria, that I thought would be an important thing to touch on. So I got out my Brown Bess musket, and I have some information here. The really neat thing about having the actual musket, I didn't have to build one, I had one. I could pull it off the wall, and as part of my presentation, I can demonstrate how much I actually know about it by having members of the audience do drills, or I can teach people how they actually would go about loading and firing a musket. Okay, so some of the positions that would go on in there. That's information that I know in my head. You don't see it written down here. Okay, that's called interpretation. Not everything that goes on with this display is going to be written on the board. And that's something that I've noticed with your human body presentations, and even in math grade 5s. When you're presenting, you're not telling me what you know, or Mrs. Harmer what you know, you're telling us what you've written on paper. And it's important to do both. That's why we really don't want you reading off of your displays. We want you to tell us what you know, because you guys know a lot of stuff. Okay, I've included some information about some important people, Sir Isaac Brock and Tecumseh. So again, meeting that expectation. I have some interactive pieces down here. Things that when you come into my classroom to have a look at the display, please don't touch these things. Okay, I've got a toy little musket rifle, and there's some history to go along with that and why it's here. Okay, I've got something on musket cartridges and loading the musket. So once again, information to go with that and why that's here. And then I built something called a blockhouse. This one, it's nothing special, okay? I just wrapped some boxes in black construction paper, but it's the history that goes along with it that's really important to the whole story of the War of 1812. The final thing that I looked at, again, looking back at our success criteria, is clothing. How am I going to work clothing into this? Well, I took Buster, and I dressed Buster up. And Buster has a shako, which is a hat, and the British red coat to help me demonstrate how a soldier would dress. Now, for my presentation, when I do my presentation, maybe a little bit later after March break, I can do this for you. I will, as a British officer serving in Upper Canada, I will be in full uniform, and I can go into great detail. If you look behind me, there's not that much text. But the information that I have in my head is what's really important. So take a minute right now. Think about what you guys see behind me and look at the success criteria. And Mrs. Harmer and I are going to lead that discussion with you right now.